A ruthless billionaire stands on the brink of financial ruin in a lavish Paris restaurant, his empire collapsing word by word, undone by a simple language barrier. Billions are slipping away, reputations hanging by a thread, when an unassuming waitress steps forward. Armed only with a hidden talent and an unexpected act of kindness, she changes everything. This story proves that true power isn't found in wealth, but in the heart. Stay glued to the end to see how one moment of compassion bridges two worlds, rewriting destinies and turning desperation into triumph. Like the video, comment your location, and subscribe for more emotional journeys. Paris in early autumn carried a crisp elegance, the leaves along the Champs-Élysées turning shades of amber under a soft evening sky. Alexander Voss emerged from his black Maybach, the door held open by a uniformed driver. At 42, he moved with the quiet authority of a man who had long ago stopped needing to prove anything. His charcoal suit was impeccably tailored, his watch a understated Patek Philippe that cost more than most people's homes. To the world, he was the untouchable founder of Voss Technologies, a billionaire whose algorithms powered half the planet's data flows. But beneath the polished surface lived a boy who had learned early that reliance on others was a luxury he could not afford. Orphaned at 7, shuffled through a dozen foster homes, Alexander had built his empire on self-sufficiency. Every merger, every acquisition, was another brick in the wall he erected against vulnerability. Trust was inefficient. Kindness, when he offered it, was calculated, except for rare, unthinking moments when something genuine slipped through. Tonight was supposed to be the capstone. A merger with Moreau Industries would add billions to his valuation and secure his dominance in European AI markets. The only problem, his longtime French interpreter had contracted food poisoning in London and was hospitalized. Alexander had waved off his assistant's panic. "I'll manage," he'd said. He always did. He stepped into Le Chateau d'Or, the Michelin-starred restaurant that catered to Paris's elite. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over white tablecloths, and the murmur of conversation blended with the faint clink of baccarat glasses. The maitre d' recognized him immediately and led him toward the private alcove reserved for the Moreau delegation. As Alexander navigated the crowded floor, a waitress deftly sidestepped him, balancing a heavy silver tray laden with Dom Perignon and crystal flutes. For a split second, their eyes met. She was younger, late 20s, with auburn hair pulled into a neat ponytail and green eyes that held steady despite the chaos around her. Her name tag read, Hilaire Dumont. In that fleeting moment, something uncharacteristic stirred in Alexander. Perhaps it was the effortless grace with which she maneuvered, or the quiet focus in a room full of posturing. Without thinking, he murmured in lightly accented French, "Pardon, mademoiselle. You make that look effortless, quite impressive in this madness." Hilaire blinked, surprised. Patrons rarely spoke to staff with anything resembling respect, most treated them as invisible. A small, genuine smile touched her lips. "Merci, monsieur. One learns to dance with the trays." She continued on, but his unexpected kindness lingered like the faint scent of her subtle perfume, something clean and citrusy. Hilaire Dumont's life was a study in quiet resilience. Born to Quebecois parents who had immigrated to France seeking better opportunities, she had grown up bilingual in a working-class suburb of Paris. Languages came naturally to her, French from school, English from her mother's bedtime stories, Spanish picked up from neighbors. She had once dreamed of the Sorbonne, of a career in international diplomacy where words could bridge nations. But her father's long illness and mounting medical bills had forced her to abandon university after 2 years. Waitressing at Le Chateau d'Or paid the rent and sent money home. Dreams were deferred indefinitely. At 28, Hilaire carried her disappointments with dignity. Her greatest wound was not the lost scholarship but the betrayal by a man she had loved, a charming graduate student who had promised to support her while she finished her degree, only to vanish with her savings when his own ambitions called him abroad. Since then, she had armored herself against the wealthy patrons who dined in her section. They were all the same, she told herself, entitled, fleeting, incapable of seeing the person behind the uniform. Yet she found small pockets of meaning. 3 evenings a week, she volunteered at a community center, teaching French to refugees. There, in the exchange of words and stories, she remembered why language had once felt like magic. That evening, as she moved between tables, Ilara caught fragments of conversation from the alcove. A group of severe-looking French executives had arrived, led by Philippe Moreau himself. Their discussion was rapid, technical, valuations, non-compete clauses, intellectual property transfers. She understood every word without effort. Across from them sat the American billionaire who had spoken kindly to her moments earlier. His French was functional but clumsy. Already, subtle misunderstandings were creeping in. Philippe's brow furrowed at something Alexander said, and the temperature at the table dropped perceptibly. Alexander felt the shift immediately. His proposed equity split had been misinterpreted as an insultingly low offer. He tried to clarify, but the more he spoke, the deeper the hole became. Inside, old alarms sounded, the familiar sting of being misunderstood, of standing alone against a room that had already decided against him. Billions were at risk, and for the first time in years, he felt the ground shifting beneath his carefully constructed world. Ilara refilled water glasses at a neighboring table, her attention divided. The billionaire's earlier compliment echoed oddly against the tension she now witnessed. She saw the tightness around his eyes, the way his fingers drummed almost imperceptibly on the tablecloth. Even titans, it seemed, could look lost. Their separate worlds, one of private jets and boardroom battles, the other of aching feet and overdue bills, existed mere meters apart, yet felt galaxies away. But the evening was young, and fate, like an unseen conductor, was already preparing their collision. The private alcove had grown oppressively warm despite the autumn chill outside. Candle flames flickered across tense faces as Philippe Moreau leaned forward, his voice low and edged with finality. Monsieur Voss, nous ne pouvons pas communiquer clairement, cette négociation est terminée. Les termes que vous proposez sont inacceptables. Alexander understood enough to feel the blood drain from his face. The valuation he had offered, intended as generous, had been twisted through his halting French into something that sounded predatory. He attempted a correction, stringing together phrases he had rehearsed on the flight over. Non, je veux dire que, la synergie justifier it unprimed. But the words tangled, and Philippe's expression hardened further. Around the table, executives exchanged glances. One checked his watch. Another began gathering papers. Alexander's mind raced through damage assessments. A failed merger would trigger a cascade, stock dip, investor panic, perhaps even a hostile takeover attempt. Billions evaporating because of a language barrier. The irony was bitter. He signaled discreetly for the maitre d', hoping for an emergency interpreter, but the man could only spread his hands apologetically. No one available on such short notice. Ilara had been circling nearby tables, her tray now empty. The drama unfolding in the alcove was impossible to ignore. She caught the American's strained expression, the way his shoulders had tightened beneath the expensive suit. And beneath her practiced detachment, something stirred, memory of his unexpected kindness earlier, the way he had seen her, however briefly, as a person rather than furniture. Philippe pushed back his chair. Nous partons. Say regrettable mais? In that frozen instant, Ilara acted on impulse. Heart hammering, she stepped forward. Excusez-moi, messieurs. Her voice was calm, professional. Je parle couramment l'anglais et le français. Si vous le permettez, je peux traduire. Silence fell. Philippe eyed her uniform, skeptical. Alexander's gaze snapped to her face, recognition, then stunned hope. After a beat, Philippe shrugged. Très bien. Asseyez-vous. Ilara pulled up a chair at the edge of the table, hyper-aware of every eye on her. The scent of rich sauces and expensive cologne mingled with her own nervous energy. She began translating, her voice steady and precise. Alexander's intended premium on Moreau shares. The strategic rationale behind the equity split. The long-term vision for integrated AI platforms. As she spoke, nuances flowed effortlessly, idioms rendered naturally, technical terms clarified without condescension. Philippe's posture relaxed fractionally. Questions came faster now, and Alara fielded them all, bridging the gap with the skill she had once hoped to use on a global stage. Alexander watched her in growing wonder. This woman who minutes ago had been invisible to him was now the only thing standing between his empire and collapse. And beneath the professional gratitude, something else flickered: admiration for her composure, curiosity about the mind that could navigate these complexities so fluidly. When the immediate crisis passed and Philippe agreed to continue discussions after dessert, the tension in the room eased like a collective exhalation. Alexander turned to Alara as the others conferred among themselves. "You just saved me more money than most people see in a lifetime. Thank you." She met his eyes, a faint flush rising. "I'm glad I could help." He reached for his wallet, but she shook her head. "No tip necessary." "Really?" Their hands brushed as she passed him a fresh water glass, a fleeting contact that sent an unexpected spark through both. In that touch lingered the first hint that something larger than a business rescue had begun. As the evening wound down and the Moreau party departed with handshakes and tentative smiles, Alexander lingered. Alara cleared the table, hyper-aware of his gaze. Neither spoke, the thoughts swirling beneath the surface. His sudden awareness of how isolated his life had become, her quiet surprise at feeling seen by someone from a world she had sworn to distrust. The spark had been struck. Neither could have predicted how fiercely it would burn. That moment when she stepped forward, chills, right? If your heart skipped a beat, smash like and comment your reaction below. Days blurred into a tense limbo. Alexander threw himself into damage control from his Paris suite, but Alara's face kept surfacing uninvited, her calm voice cutting through chaos, the intelligence in her green eyes. He resisted the intrusion fiercely. Attraction was distraction, vulnerability, dangerous. She was an employee of the restaurant, worlds apart. Better to keep it professional. Alara, meanwhile, replayed the evening with growing unease. The billionaire's gratitude had felt genuine, but experience whispered caution. Men like him collected people the way they collected companies, until something shinier appeared. She doubled her shifts, volunteered extra hours, anything to crowd out the memory of his quiet, "thank you." Fate, however, had other plans. A discrepancy emerged in the merger documents, a subtle clause about technology transfer that required immediate clarification. Alexander's interpreter remained hospitalized. With time zones working against him, he returned to Le Château d'Or hoping to catch Alara. He found her during a slow lunch service. "I hate to impose again," he began awkwardly, "but there's a legal phrase I need translated accurately. It could make or break everything." Against her better judgment, she agreed, for a fair consulting fee this time. They sat in a quiet corner while she parsed the dense legalese, explaining nuances he had missed. Conversation drifted dangerously beyond business. He mentioned growing up with nothing. She let slip her abandoned university dreams. Each revelation felt like stepping onto thinning ice. External pressures mounted quickly. Paparazzi snapped photos of Alexander entering the restaurant twice in 1 week. Gossip sites speculated about a mystery redhead. Alara's boss warned her sharply about professionalism. Her ex-boyfriend, smelling opportunity, began texting again, poisonous suggestions that she was being used. Alexander's own world closed in. Board members questioned his focus. Stock analysts noted volatility. When Alara gently suggested he consider Philippe's cultural perspective on partnership, he snapped, "I don't need advice on how to run my company." The hurt in her eyes registered too late. They parted with strained politeness, both retreating behind familiar walls. Yet circumstances refused to release them. Philippe Moreau, impressed by the capable young translator, insisted she be present for the final negotiations. "She understands both sides," he declared. Alara's boss assigned her without consultation. Alexander had no choice but to agree. As the decisive dinner approached, resistance cracked under mounting pressure. Late-night texts about document prep turned personal. He admitted loneliness at the top. She confessed fear of trusting again. Each message chipped away at defenses neither wanted breached. The evening of the final meeting arrived charged with unspoken tension. They would be forced together for hours, no escape, no pretense. Whatever spark had ignited threatened to become an inferno, or burn out entirely. The push and pull is killing me. If you're feeling the tension too, follow now and subscribe so you catch every moment of what's coming. The private dining room felt smaller than ever as the final negotiations began. Ilara sat at Alexander's right, officially his interpreter for the evening, though everyone knew she had become far more. Philippe and his team spread documents across the table like territory to be claimed. 4 hours, Ilara translated with flawless precision, but awareness of Alexander's proximity made every moment electric. His sleeve brushed her arm when reaching for papers. His quiet merci after each exchange lingered in the air. Between rounds, as the French team conferred privately, conversation turned personal. He asked about her volunteering. She drew out stories of his early coding days in cramped apartments. Vulnerability emerged in fragments. His admission that success had cost him every real relationship, her quiet confession that betrayal had made her afraid to dream again. Laughter surprised them both when she taught him a playful French idiom he mangled adorably. He gifted her a rare first edition of Proust, in French and English editions side by side. "For someone who loves languages," he said simply. She accepted with shining eyes. Walks along the Seine became ritual after late sessions. Paris at night wrapped them in golden light and river reflections. They spoke of childhood wounds, of ambitions surrendered and reclaimed. He listened, truly listened, as she described teaching refugees. She saw beneath his polished exterior to the boy who had learned too early that the world could be cruel. A fragile bond wove itself from these shared hours. Trust built word by word, glance by glance. When negotiations hit sticking points, they strategized together seamlessly, finishing each other's thoughts. Yet shadows lingered. Ilara feared the inevitability of his return to New York. Alexander wrestled with pride. Could he ask her to uproot her life? When Philippe mentioned rumors of rival bidders pressuring for exclusivity in Europe, Alexander's future suddenly hinged on staying in Paris longer, perhaps permanently. "Would you?" He began one evening along the river, then stopped. The question, could she imagine a future beyond translation, hung unspoken. She met his eyes, heart pounding. Hope warred with old fears. The bond between them had grown strong but delicate, built on forced proximity that was about to end. As the final documents awaited only signatures, a hint of looming heartbreak colored every touch, every shared smile. They had found something rare, but would the worlds pulling them apart prove stronger? Dawn broke gray and cold over Paris when crisis detonated. Alexander's phone shattered the silence of his suite with an urgent call from New York. A trusted lieutenant had leaked sensitive merger details to competitors, deliberate sabotage born of resentment over bonuses tied to the European deal. Within hours, stocks plunged 15%. Philippe Moreau's fury arrived via furious voicemail, accusations of bad faith, threats to void the agreement. Alexander stood at his window watching the city awaken, feeling his carefully constructed life fracture. Billions gone in hours. Worse, the familiar sting of betrayal. The boy who had trusted foster families only to be passed along surfaced raw and bleeding. He had pushed Ilara away after their last evening together, claiming he needed space to focus. Pride had won then, now it left him devastatingly alone. Across the city, Ilara learned the news from morning headlines while preparing coffee in her tiny kitchen. Her first instinct was protective worry for him, followed immediately by old defenses snapping into place. Rich men and their dramas, she should stay clear. Yet memories of his quiet vulnerabilities along the Seine undermined every rationalization. Internal battles raged through the day. Alexander drafted resignation letters in his mind, considered selling divisions to stem losses. Pride screamed to handle it alone. Ilara volunteered extra hours at the center, losing herself in teaching, seeking clarity among strangers' stories of loss and rebuilding. Philippe demanded an emergency meeting that evening at Le Château de neutral ground to decide the merger's fate. Neither Alexander nor Ilara could avoid attendance. They arrived separately, the familiar dining room now feeling like a courtroom. Philippe's accusations flew sharp and fast. Alexander defended himself in fractured French, growing frustration evident. Ilara translated mechanically at first, but each exchanged barb twisted something inside her. When Philippe declared, "This smells of deliberate deception," something in Ilara broke open. "Arrêtez," she said quietly but firmly. All eyes turned. "Monsieur Voss in a rain sabote. I know him." The admission hung in the air. She continued, voice strengthening, "I've seen him fight honorably for this deal. If there's betrayal, it's not from him." Alexander stared at her, stunned. Philippe raised an eyebrow but listened as Ilara laid out timeline inconsistencies she had noticed during translations, details only someone intimately involved would catch. In the charged silence that followed, Alexander found his voice. "She's right. I should have trusted her sooner." He turned to Ilara, walls crumbling. "I've spent my life building walls because everyone leaves eventually. But losing you these past days, it's worse than losing billions." Tears glistened in her eyes. "I was scared too. Scared you'd leave like everyone else who promised more." Philippe cleared his throat, unexpectedly moved. "Perhaps we investigate this leak properly before burning bridges, non?" Hours later, forensic accountants confirmed the internal sabotage. The traitor was identified. The deal could be salvaged with transparency amendments. Stocks began recovering by morning. But the real resolution unfolded afterward in the empty restaurant, chandeliers dimmed to intimate glow. Alexander took Ilara's hands. "I don't want to return to a life where kindness is rare and connection rarer. Stay with me, not as interpreter, but as partner. In business, in Paris, in whatever comes next." She searched his face, finding only raw honesty. "And I don't want to keep deferring dreams out of fear." "Yes." They kissed beneath the same chandeliers that had witnessed their beginning, slow, wondering, as if discovering a language neither had known they spoke. Months later, Ilara joined Voss Technologies as head of international linguistic AI development, her expertise shaping ethical global communication tools. They divided time between Paris and New York, building something neither had dared hope for, a life where vulnerability was strength and kindness the truest currency. Some endings are fairy tales. Theirs was better, messy, hard-won, and profoundly real. What an emotional journey! If this story moved you, share your favorite moment in the comments, tell me how it made you feel, and subscribe for more stories that remind us connection is the greatest wealth of all. Thank you for coming along on this ride with me.